way I can send it to those that missed.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. This is our normal monthly lunch and learn that we do on the first Wednesday of every month. My name is Kevin Barrett. I am from True North Professional Development in Seattle. I am a coach and a consultant and a trainer, and we guide teams and individuals to accelerated business success. And I want to spend some time talking to you today about effective communication. Before I show my screen here, I'm going to ask everybody to go find the reactions button and find the raise hand button in there. And if everybody could just raise your hand, because we're going to do a little activity. And I want to make sure that you have that capability. And of course, you can customize it. All right, we've got some hand clapping going on too. That's all right too. All right, so let me go ahead and share my screen here and actually get my presentation up and running. All right. And I forgot that I was going through it before, so I've got, oh, there we go. Okay, so let me share my screen and then we will get started. All right, so again, my name is Kevin Barrett. I am with True North Professional Development. We are here today to talk about effective communication in the digital age. Boy, this has got just so much to it. As I was telling Mary beforehand, I did a bunch of research. I'm actually working with a client right now where these issues are coming up, just happens to be happening at the same time as my presentation here. So it's going to be, I'll have some really valid and important information, I think, that on what their experience has been. So Mary, could you drop everybody's hands?
What just happened?
All right, and then we've got Carrie coming in. All right, so Mary is with me as always, right? We trade off every month presenting. So this month is my month to present. Mary will be our moderator. As always, we really love to have interaction, and I want to hear from you today as we go through on what your experiences have been, not only with communication, but communicating digitally, right? Through email, through text, through various different other tools that you may have. And I'm actually going to run through a list of various tools that are out there, and it is by no means an exhaustive list. It is very much an overview, but you'll get an idea, and we'll do a deep dive on one of them in particular. All right, so Mary will be monitoring chat. If you have any questions or comments that you want to make, feel free to drop it into there. And we do have a relatively small group, so feel free to unmute too if you have a question or a comment that you want to make. All right, so here's what we're going to cover today, just to give you kind of an overview of it. We're going to talk about the importance of effective workplace communication. We're going to talk about what makes it effective, right? What are the attributes that we have for effective communication, how that affects team communication dynamics, and then we'll spend the bulk of the time on digital communication platforms, various platforms that are out there, and what you need to think about before you institute some of those different platforms into your team or into your business. We'll also talk about strategies for effective workplace communication. And typically, and I know Mary does these communication classes as well, we talk a lot about face-to-face, and we talk about a lot about doing stuff on the phone, but maybe don't dig as deep as we'll dig today on how is it affected when you're communicating with somebody over these digital platforms. So we'll talk about strategies for effective workplace communication and how digital platforms affect that. And then we're going to talk about just drawing some conclusions here at the end today. So we've got a lot we'll cover. All right, so let's get started with our first topic here. We're going to talk about effective workplace communication. and what goes into that. So this is where that little activity is going to come in here. And so I'm going to ask you to a series of questions here. And what I'd like to have you do is just raise your hand, your virtual hand, if you have done one of these things or experienced one of these things in the workplace. All right. And so we'll also ask you to drop the hand back down or click that button again in between these questions. But let's get started here. So most of us have worked in work environments, right, where we have teams of people or coworkers that we work with, right? And so I want to just ask some questions. And again, just use your digital hand to show me whether you have done this. Have you ever ignored or neglected to respond to workplace or work-related emails or messages? I expected. Everybody, right? We've all done that, I think. So very, 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 very common thing that we might do. All right.
So
Drop the
Kevin,
hands.
that's not necessarily intentional, right?
Yeah, absolutely. May not be intentional, right? Which is a really good point, Mary, because sometimes you just get so overwhelmed with emails, right? That, oh, you might have seen the headline and then a week later go, oh my God, I've never responded to that. All right. All right, let's do another one here. So have you ever communicated important information to only select individuals within your team, excluding others who may need to be informed? And again, that could be intentional or not. All right, I think that's pretty much everybody. All right, so let's drop the hands again. Let's do this one. Have you ever spoken negatively about a colleague or team member behind their back instead of addressing issues directly with them? Yeah, I'm going to raise my hand on that as well, right? All right, so most of these, the bulk of us have done it, right? All right, let's do another one. Have you interrupted or talked over someone during a meeting or discussion without allowing them to finish speaking? Mary, are you covering your face? All right, but look, most of us have done that, right? And again, intentionally or not intentionally, right? All right, we'll do one more here. All right, have you ever completely withheld information for a period of time and realized later that you should have said something? Yeah, right? All of us, pretty much, okay? So I think it's important for us to establish right up front that we contribute to these kinds of things, right? So these behaviors that are there really contribute to ineffectiveness of workplace communication. And if we're going to be honest, most of us have done these types of things, right? So that's one really important thing for us to kind of think about up front, right? We have the capability of being able to make communication better with the people that we work with, right? And so today is really all about how we can be more effective at that, and particularly when we incorporate digital communication in as a part of that. So thanks for playing along with that activity. I expected that most of us would raise our hands on that because we've all had those things come up. All right, so for years, I have kind of used an analogy about communication. I really believe, particularly for management people, getting effective at communicating with people is such an important thing. So here's the analogy that I've used, which is that communication is like oil. All right, so here's why. All right, oil forms a layer of lubrication between metal surfaces or engine parts that reduces friction and wear that occurs when parts move against each other, right? That's when those personalities clash. If we can build a good, strong communication, it's going to make that a little bit easier, right? This one plays in as well, coolant. So oil acts as a coolant by absorbing heat produced in the engine combustion chambers, cooling the engine and helping to prevent overheating. All right. Oil acts as a sealant, filling microscopic ridges and valleys found in any metal surface, increasing the engine's efficiency, right? Oil is a detergent, so it carries away dirt or other damaging debris. Debris is removed through the engine oil filter or the transmission filter and just helps clean things up, right? Oil is also a rust inhibitor. It neutralizes acids produced by combustion gases, preventing rust and corrosion. So just like oil in an engine, communication can really provide the same types of benefits to a team or an organization. The stronger that we can build the communication that we have, the better, right? And some of that takes us really looking at ourselves and how we approach communication, just like on those things that we raised our hands on. All right. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what makes effective communication. We know that it really helps, but what makes it? Well, first of all, effective communication is the exchange of information between individuals or groups in a manner that is clear, concise, and understood. All right, so we have our sender, right? They're sending the information. They have to put together whatever it is that message is going to be. And that's where we want to be. If we are the sender, we want to be as clear and concise as we possibly can be. All right, well then, after the message is ready to go, the sender needs to decide what channel it's going to go through. Are we going to deliver that information face to face? Are we going to deliver it over the phone? Are we going to use digital communication to do that? Email, text, various other different tools that are available. All right, then the information gets to the receiver, right? And of course, we hope that the receiver understands that message given the message that we created and the channel that we've chosen to deliver that message. And assuming that they do, right, they might have feedback that they want to provide. So they have to choose what channel. And I'll just give you an example. We probably have all experienced this, right? That person that really only wants to talk to you by email, and it just keeps going back and forth, and there's 7 emails back and forth, and then you decide finally, you know what, I'm just going to pick up the phone because it's a lot easier to do it over the phone than it is through email, right? But we're choosing those channels for that communication all the time. And then of course that feedback comes back to us, and hopefully given the message and given the channel, we understand that, right? And then the whole cycle just begins again, right? And so it's this constant run through this cycle with communication to make sure that what we're saying is what's understood on the other side, right? We all know of that old game, that telephone game, right? Where when we pass the message down the line, you get to the 7th or 8th person and it's not even necessarily the same message, right? Because there's interpretation that comes into that as well. All right. There's also some barriers that come into play in terms of this process as well. So there are some physical barriers that we need to think about, right? They might be things like, hey, it's really noisy, I can't hear you, right? What's all the noise that's going on behind you, right? Or I'm in a work situation and it's very noisy around me. Distance can also play a huge factor in this, right? If we've got somebody who's geographically dispersed from where we are, it just complicates the communication more, right? If we're not standing face to face, if I can't walk over to somebody's office or cube and talk to them directly, there can be some challenges that are there, right? And this is something that I deal with a lot with folks who are managing people, where part of the team is working from home and part of the team is in the office, right? And it just becomes a very easy thing sometimes for managers to not necessarily forget the people that are more remote, right? But they maybe don't pay as much attention as the folks that are right there in front of them. All right. All right. Yeah, Cole, I love it. Harder to have a quick back and forth. Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Another barrier that we need to kind of think about are psychological barriers, right? So those might be things like emotions, right? I'm just having a particularly bad day. The messages are not getting through to me, right? Or I'm worried that because I'm just so frustrated about some things at home that I'm going to be very short with people today, right? Stereotypes that we have, right? That can certainly be a barrier for us for communication. And personality conflicts, right? And this is something Mary and I talk a lot about, is the way we do things, right? We are all kind of set up to do things in a particular way, and there are personality conflicts that can get in the way of the way that we communicate, right? We have to actually learn how to be able to communicate with different styles than we have ourselves. All right. And then semantic barriers. So these include things like language differences, right? I'll never forget going to Paris and wanted to get some stamps for my niece and don't speak French, right? And so I went to the post office in the Louvre and asked the guy at the counter, "Do you speak English?" And he replied to me, "I can." He wasn't very happy about it, but he did. And I was like, oh, thank goodness, right? At least I can speak English, right? To get the stamps that I wanted to get. All right. Jargon is another thing, right? So many different organizations have all this jargon, right? And particularly new employees don't necessarily understand that. I was just in a meeting a few weeks ago where somebody started a general contractor started throwing off all these things, and I'm like, am I the only one here that doesn't have a clue what he's talking about, right? Maybe I better ask, right? And as it turned out, everybody else was like, oh yeah, I wanted to know too what that was. All right, Derek says the majority of my on-site team speaks only Spanish. I feel that every day. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, the last one there in that list of the semantics is communication systems and channels. And you'll see that as we get into talking about some of these different communication systems and channels, there are tremendous benefits to them, but there are also obstacles. And oftentimes people kind of trip into these different communication systems without really thinking about what those are.
Kevin, that's one of the things that, as you go through, because I use that effective communication, the channel thing, like the sender, and then you send it through the channel. You have to remind yourself to keep those channels clear. Like if your phone is always in like off position, you're not keeping the channel clear. If you ignore your emails, you're not keeping your channel clear. If you're, and so many times those are things that we have control over. We just don't necessarily make the effort.
Yeah. And the remarkable thing too is that it's a balancing thing, right? So when we talk about time management, yeah, there's times where you have to have your phone off, right? Because you need to be able to concentrate, or you need to tell people, hey, I just can't chat right now, right? So it takes a lot of work to be able to manage all that and find the balance in all that. So yeah, thank you.
And being approachable is also one of those, keeping the channel clear.
Absolutely. All right. So those are some of the things that we need to think about, right? Barriers that play into there. So for most teams, for a team to really work efficiently, there are some really clear communication channels that we need. Now, I'm not talking about the digital type of channels. I'm talking about just general channels in terms of communication. So one of the things that's really important is establishing formal and informal channels, right? So why is it we have to use that form when this particular thing happens? Well, it's a formal thing that we've set up, right? So we want to kind of think about, why do we use things like forms for certain processes, or creating a memo, or versus when we have an email or a phone call. When do we use an email or a phone call? And what happens if problems arise, right? You're not going to send a memo. You're probably not going to send an email, right? You're probably going to pick up the phone and call somebody, right? So it's really kind of deciding which are the channels, right? And which are kind of formal and informal. Second channel we'll talk about here is just utilizing technology for seamless communication. And I want to underline seamless, because many of us have the perception that if we have digital forms of communication, it's really seamless. But in fact, it's like any other form of communication. It's got benefits to it, and it's also got obstacles. And again, I'll give you some examples of that here in a bit. All right. And then we really need to have an important channel here to make sure things are clear by establishing feedback loops for clarity and understanding. So that is things like team meetings and one-on-ones and team check-ins and stand-up meetings and those kinds of things, where we can share and provide feedback to each other about how things are going, right? Those really need to be something that we think about and that we build into our communication. All right. So let's look at why those things are really important for us from a team dynamic standpoint. All right. So here's some things that we know through research about what is a strong team dynamic. And I'm going to cover off on 3 different aspects of this. One is strong team communication. If we have strong team communication, it's going to enhance productivity and efficiency within the team. It's going to foster innovation and creativity for people as well, right? You kind of naturally get that brainstorming going on that is going to be able to take maybe pieces of information, pull it together into some new idea, right? And it builds trust and morale. And I'm going to dive into that here in just a moment as well. Let's talk about why that's important for us, right? So we need to have open communications. We need to have transparency and honesty. This is one thing that I work with a lot of business owners on, is that sometimes they hold information very tight to their chest. And I just really encourage them, try to be as transparent as you can be, right? You have to decide what that is. But a lack of transparency can cause people to become very suspicious. It can cause morale to go down, right? People pick up on that very, very quickly if you're not being transparent and honest. And then recognizing and valuing diverse perspectives, right? That's ways that businesses really succeed, is if we can get a variety of different ideas and perspectives on things, right? To be able to look at maybe some new ideas and look at things in a new way. All right. So you see that trust and morale and rapport all come into both of these categories. And I want to share a quote that I've shared before. This quote is from Paul Zak from the Center of Neuroeconomics. He says, trust is a leading indicator for performance. If trust is higher, performance will be higher. They have done a tremendous amount of research on this, right? And we know that in order to have that trust, right, we can't have trust unless we've got really good communication. People just don't trust you if you don't communicate very well, right? Or at least to the level that maybe would be the most efficient and effective for you. In another little survey here, Gallup said this: managers can only keep employees informed and engaged if organizational priorities are clear and well communicated as changes occur. Fuzzy or confusing messaging from the top only makes managers' lives more stressful. And as you dive into that, what they're saying is that you're going to have all kinds of little morale problems that are going to come up. You're going to have a lot of confusion. You're going to have people pushing in different directions, right? If you don't get really clear on what that communication is. And so that leads to our third team communication dynamics, and that is that it enhances collaboration, right? If we have shared goals and visions, if we have clear roles and responsibilities on who's doing what, and if we can utilize collaborative tools and platforms, we can really be much better at being able to work with one another, right? Now, I can tell you over the course of my career and running teams for the last 25 years now, a lot of times the team is resistant to those kinds of things in terms of the collaborative tools and the platforms and the check-ins that we need to do and that. But it is just so important to be able to run teams effectively and efficiently. All right. All right. So that's kind of set the background here for where we're going to spend the bulk of our time today. And that is talking about these digital communication platforms. And I'm going to actually go through for you 6 different categories of digital communication platforms, and give you some examples of those. You may want to take a screenshot of this slide once it's done here, because it's going to have a lot of information on it. All right. So let's talk about the first communication platform here. That is email and instant messaging. So things like Gmail or Outlook or Slack or Microsoft Teams, right? That is by no means an exhaustive list, but that is a good representation of kind of the most popular ways to do email, and instant messaging. All right. The next category is our project management tools. So things like Microsoft Project or Asana or Trello or Jira or Monday.com. Those are all different ways that you can work very collaboratively with your team to be able to manage projects, right? And to kind of keep projects on track. One of the key things that happens with these platforms is that we implement these project management tools and we think they're easy, or they seem easy for us, and so we make the decision not to do any training on it, right? And then people are kind of lost and things aren't working the way that they're supposed to work, or we're not really getting the efficiency out of these project management tools because people don't really understand how to use them most effectively. All right. All right, we're using one of these in the next category, video conferencing tools. So things like Zoom and Microsoft Teams and Google Meet and GoToMeeting. And there's a ton of other ones that are there as well, right? And most of you who are running any kind of Zoom meetings or Teams meetings know that those tools have really gotten robust over the last couple of years, right? From the time of the pandemic, when a lot of people were introduced to Zoom, right? There's just so many more tools and so many more settings. There's literally pages and pages and pages of settings that are there, right? So for us to be able to utilize those most effectively, we've got to have a good understanding of those. And I still am, looking at the help system in Zoom because something's happening that I don't know what to do with it, right? So really important for us to have a good understanding of those. So these are 3 of our digital communication platforms. The next category here is document sharing and collaboration. So things like Google Drive or Dropbox, OneDrive, SharePoint, another way for us to be able to share information or documents with one another, right? And they're fairly, kind of fairly easy to utilize, but I run into folks all the time that are like, I happen to be the vice president of a local Chamber of Commerce. We use Dropbox for sharing documents, and we still have people on the board who are like, I have no clue how that works. I have no clue how to get to Dropbox, right? So it is important to be able to share information about how to get to those and how they work, right? All right, next category of digital communication platforms are communication apps, right? So utilizing text, right? There's a lot of folks that I work with that are utilizing text, and it seems like the younger the average age of the organization, the more likely they're going to be using text with one another. Slack is another one. Slack is another tool to be able to do text-like things. And I'm going to dig into that one a little bit more deeply here. We have WhatsApp and we have Discord and we have Microsoft Teams. Lots of different ways that we can communicate individually through texting to one another, right? All right. Last category here, that is internet and internal platforms like SharePoint and Yammer and Workplace by Facebook. Ways that we can communicate while you're sitting at your desk and I'm sitting at mine, right? Different ways that we can share documents with one another as well. All right. And so lots of organizations adopt these types of things for one reason or another. But if you adopt them and you really don't show people how to use them, then they're really not as effective as you might hope that they would be. All right. So I'm going to do a little dive here. I wish I could spend time kind of going through the ups and downs of each one of these, but I'm going to actually dig into one. So this would be a point if you're interested in kind of digging in or doing some research on some of these. This might be a good time for you to do a screenshot there to grab that list of names. I'll bring it back up here in a little bit as well. But we're going to dig into one in particular here. We're going to spend some time talking about Slack. Who's heard of Slack? Give me a little hands up if you've heard of Slack. Okay. So it looks like we've got about maybe 6 folks that have heard of it. So you may have heard of it, but do you know what it is? Right? That might be something different, right? So here's what Slack, oh, go ahead. Ah, Michelle, I see the thumbs up. All right. So here's what it does. It is kind of a texting tool, but it's got a lot more to it. It's much more robust than that. So it has channels for specific projects or teams or topics. So you can break it into various different channels if you want. There is a direct messaging aspect to it. So if Mary's got Slack and I've got Slack, I can instant message Mary, right, and ask her a question. And as with most instant messaging, it's great because if Mary's not there, she's in a meeting, she's in a phone call right now, she's just going to answer it when she can, right? All right. Then there are file sharing capabilities with this. So it allows users to share files, documents, images within conversations that they're having, right? So it would be like texting a picture to somebody, but I can text a document to somebody, right? I can send them a link to something like that. Now, this also integrates very, very well with a wide range of third-party applications. So things like Google Drive and Trello and Zoom, for example, they have integration capabilities utilizing Slack, right? And that what that means, of course, is that it integrates in a way that I can utilize both of them together, all right? Now, one big difference between Slack and just regular texting is it's really got robust search capabilities. So I can search by channel, I can search by document, I can search by person or team if I want to do that. And so there's lots of different ways that I could utilize Slack to be able to search for what I'm looking for. And then lastly, it has got some notifications and alerts that can be customized by users. So you have the capability of choosing what you want to be notified about, right? That somebody sent you a Slack message, or if there's a document in it, you can have an alert that comes up, right? Or if a particular word comes up, if billing comes up, right, you can have an alert that tells you, hey, Kevin, pay attention because this message chain that's going back and forth between people has the word billing in it, right? So it's got some really incredible different things that you can utilize to be able to dig in, all right? So let's talk a little bit about some of the benefits of Slack. And again, I'm utilizing this as an example of one of these digital tools, right? So Slack has enhanced communication. It has centralized information. So it's almost like you're taking a share drive, right? It's connected to it. And so you can grab documents out of it if you want to, or you can share documents with one another. It has really great tools to be able to increase your productivity. It has remote collaboration, and this is where those two kind of come together. If you've got people that are out in the field and doing stuff all day, they can still get to all of that on their phone, right? So they can get to those files or those pictures or you know, whatever information you're sharing. And then it does have customization for each individual in terms of those notifications and in terms of what they see and what they don't see, right? And allow you to kind of push some things maybe to the end of the day if you want to do that. So all of those benefits are really terrific, right? But here's some of the different obstacles that come in there is information overload, right? So imagine if your texts, your text app that you've got has the capability of seeing all the documents that are going through your company, right? Or all the communication that's going through, right? There's just a lot there. And people can become very overloaded very quickly. And I'm finding that a number of organizations, particularly the one that I'm working with right now, is experiencing that, right? Where it's great to have all the information all in one place, but it can really overwhelm people. The next obstacle there is context switching. And I love this term. This is kind of what we used to call tasking, right? We're switching contexts, right? Because we know from lots of research that multitasking doesn't work. Really, what you're doing is you're shifting your brain from one context to another, right? So constant notifications and interruptions can really get people down, right? And so if they're not able to manage those notifications, it can be just really very disruptive to their day. All right. And particularly for those people that like to respond immediately, right? One of the things that I always teach when I teach Outlook is turn that notification thing off. You don't need to know about every single email that comes in, right? And Slack kind of has the same thing. The default is you're going to get a notification on every single message that comes in. All right. All right.
Did you see Cole's comment in
Oh.
the chat? Does Slack have any particular advantages over Teams or other Microsoft program platforms?
It's very, very similar to Teams. And so in a way, Teams kind of has a little bit of an advantage because Slack integrates into Zoom, right? But Teams has got their conferencing platform built into it, right? Teams also integrates very, very well with Outlook and with the other Microsoft products, right? So in a way, Teams is probably a little bit better. I would say, well, I guess it's probably about the same if you've got remote teams or teams that are out in the field, because they do have the capability of grabbing that off their phone as well. So they're probably very close. I don't know which one I'd pick over the other, but if you're using a lot of Microsoft products and whatnot, there's certainly probably some advantage to it being Teams rather than Slack.
I think Teams also addresses some of the security concerns that Slack has.
Say that again, Mary.
I said, I think Teams also addresses some of the security concerns that I have with Slack.
Yeah. Yeah. And those are absolutely important, right? Those security concerns that you might have. It is cloud-based, right? So you're transferring information over the cloud. It's not that you wouldn't do that in Teams, but you got to really understand what are those security protocols that are there, right? When you're sharing sensitive information on your company or sensitive information about people, right? You really want to understand that. In addition, it's also got some adoption challenges as well, right? So sometimes people just don't like to use it. And particularly if there's not training that goes with it. A lot of organizations are saying, well, Slack is just like texting, right? If you can text, you can Slack. And that is not the case. There are so many robust additions to Slack that you're probably going to have some people that are going to push back on it, right? It is a different way of working. And again, particularly when you add in that information overload, that can really be a challenge here. So let me talk about this company that I'm working with right now. I am working with a company who brought in Slack because they figured that it would be more efficient and effective tool than texting. And as you can see, it is. It's got lots of robust things that texting does not have, right? But this company is experiencing that information overload, right? Like there are so many channels that they've built into it with different projects and different teams, right? I spent some time with the bookkeeper who was like, it took me a while to figure out how I could even just block out some of the messages because I literally felt like messages were coming all day. And then you'd read through this chain of messages and go, that has nothing to do with me, right? I've just spent 10 minutes working on trying to understand how I fit into the Slack string, but discovering that I didn't, right? So they're feeling the information overload. They have actually had to go back as an organization and teach their people how to manage those notifications and alerts that are coming, right? Because some people are just feeling very, very overloaded with that. They also have some security concerns now that they didn't really think about, right? They kind of moved quickly into bringing Slack in, but they're having some security issues around that. And in fact, there's actually been some customer service and billing issues that have come up as a result of that, right? Where somebody on their team is sending a Slack to the bookkeeper and saying, hey, invoice this, but they didn't do it in the right way, and then it sat there for a week, right? Or various different things that managers have requested the owner to approve, that the owner didn't approve because the owner really didn't fully understand Slack either, right? So really important for you to kind of think about those things. And in fact, what I want to do now is kind of shift to talking a little bit about, with these digital communication platforms and all the other ones that are possibly there, what are some things that you need to think about if you're thinking about bringing in any of these digital communication platforms? So really important to do your research. I mentioned at the beginning, and to Mary ahead of time here, that I just did a lot of research on these various different tools, right? But there's so many more tools that are out there, and you really have to dig in. And in some cases, if I was making a decision between those, I would want to talk to somebody to really understand, right, how those things operate. Ask about integration concerns, right? So what integration concerns do you have? Really think that through. Ask about any security concerns that you might have, right? Think about situations in which you might be sending information that is personal, of a personal nature for employees. In other words, like employee records or anything that are trade secret types of things, right? You really want to think about, well, what if that gets into the wrong hands, right? And so how does this digital communication platform protect me and protect my business from that? Think about the implications to your customers, right? That's one thing that this organization really didn't do. They didn't really think about, well, what goes wrong, right? And somebody doesn't get their invoice, right? Or they don't get their refund for 2 weeks because it got lost in Slack, right? Limit who gets it first. And I looked at a lot of different people that talk about implementing these types of platforms, and this seems to be a really important thing, right? Limit who gets it first, and then test. So many organizations are opening up, they get a digital platform like this and they just open it up to all employees, and then they don't do any training, right? And so there's just a lot of space there for problems to arise and come up, right?
So
All right,
Kevin,
and then,
one other thought is, I would add training to that list. Do they provide training? Is there a cost for that training? Right? Yeah. There you go. And
exactly.
How do you store it? So many times we're on digital, and we have to come to an agreement where those files are, because I've had employees leave and then we don't know where those files are. They're someplace, maybe in their computer, maybe on their phone, maybe,
Right. And so do you have policies and procedures around how all of that is managed, right? Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, when this organization that I'm working with right now, I asked them, okay, when you brought Slack in, what training did you do? Oh, well, they have a kind of a training intranet kind of a thing that had 2 documents that had both the policy in it and a couple of videos from Slack on how to use it. And I'm like, so that was your training, right? Yeah, that was it. This is what our policy is on using Slack, which in retrospect, they were like, but that policy is crap, because that's what we thought we needed to cover in the policy, right? And obviously these 2 videos that are here don't do enough, right? So what other training do they have? I think Mary's that's a really, really great and important question there. All right. All right, so those are kind of 6 things that you really should think about if you're thinking about bringing in those digital communication platforms, or if you currently got digital communication platforms, right? Have you really thought through all of these different things? Try to anticipate what might be a problem for you coming up, right? All right, let's talk about one more magical thing here, which we have not covered, and that is artificial intelligence, right? Everybody knows about artificial intelligence. For the last year, that's all you hear about, right? It's all over the news. You're hearing about it constantly. People are talking about it. People are experimenting with it, right? And so how does that play into your team, your business, the projects that you do, right? And so I want to share with you 5 crucial considerations before implementing artificial intelligence. And I want you to kind of keep in mind that your employees may already be using it, right? And you don't even know it. And so do you have a policy around artificial intelligence, on how it should be used, on what are things that we need to consider, right? And this is by no means an effort to say don't use artificial intelligence. I have to say that I use it myself on some things when I want to get some clarity on some things. They are tremendously great tools, but if you're implementing it with your organization or your team, there's really 5 really critical things for you to think about. First of all, data security and privacy, right? So although many of the tools claim that the information that you provide in the tool is not something that they hold on to, you got to kind of keep in mind that you are sending information into those tools, right? And they may be trade secret information or potentially private information of employees or patients, right? That you're putting into these tools, right? So whatever tool, then there's a lot of different AI tools that are there. What's their policy on that? Do they actually keep that information, right? How were they trained? There's been lots of different cases of situations where these tools were trained using copyrighted information, and some of the information they're sharing with you is copyrighted, but it's not indicating that to you that it's copyrighted, right? And so you may use it in a brochure and then find out later, wow, that was copyrighted information, right? So really important to kind of think about that. Accuracy and reliability is another thing. And in fact, anytime that I use AI for anything, particularly if it's giving me any kind of historical information, I'm going to go out and verify that information is correct, right? So it can generate human-like responses. It's really important for us to recommend or recognize that it does have limitations and potential for errors. So really important to evaluate the reliability and the accuracy of the information that it does provide to you. All right. All right. Next one, integration and compatibility. So assess how the AI tool integrates with existing systems and workflows. Compatibility with other tools and platforms is really crucial for seamless integration and maximizing the tool's effectiveness. And this is particularly if you're creating your own kind of AI tools for various different things that you're doing. Really important that you're understanding that. Training and support, really important as well. So providing adequate training and support to employees who will use AI is essential for successful implementation. Really investing in comprehensive training programs to make sure that people are utilizing best practices and they're helping you to limit potential liability with the information, right? I can share with you a little situation that my sister had recently with an employee where the employee was providing some reports and she noticed kind of this same pattern of the way that information was being presented. And she actually went to one of the AI tools and typed in what she was looking for, and it really came back in the same kind of style, right? So she discovered that the employee was using AI to help them generate reports and do various different things, right? But wasn't taking the time to really look at the results of what was there, right? So this is really important as we get into the last one here, which is the ethical and responsible use of the AI power of the AI tool, right, that you're utilizing. So consider what are the ethical implications of that. Make sure that it's deployed responsibly, that you've got a policy about when to use AI and when not. Make sure that you've got guidelines for the appropriate use of it. particularly if you're sending information to customers, you want to make sure that it's accurate, right? So really important that as you consider utilizing AI in your own business, right, that you carefully consider these factors and that so that you can mitigate risks and maximize the benefits of it and ensure successful integration into your various tools that you're using. All right. Again, if you have any questions on that, feel free to drop them in and I'll hang around afterwards because that one may generate some different ideas as well. All right. We've got about 8 minutes here to go. So let's talk about strategies for effective workplace communication. So here's what we know, right? That we know that when we have effective communication, active listening is in place, right? That we're actually paraphrasing and summarizing and that we're really paying attention to what is being said. We also know that to have effective workplace communication, it needs to be clear and concise messaging, right? And so making sure that we're getting to that. We have to have feedback mechanisms in place, right? So that people can provide feedback to each other about how things are going. And no effective workplace communication is complete without conflict resolution strategies, right? How do we deal with the conflicts that may come up, right? How do people talk to one another, right? How do they handle it from a communication standpoint? So these are categories that in any communication class, you're going to see these come up. So I wanted to do a little bit of a comparison here about these various different types and then talk about how the different types of communication or the different channels of communication play into this, right? So face-to-face, can we have active listening? Yes, we can, right? We can have clarity and concise messaging. Doesn't mean that we do, right? But we can, right? Feedback mechanisms, absolutely, we can see that, right? Conflict resolution strategies, yes, we can have that, all right? When we take the communication to the phone, of course, we can do all of those things, but we don't have that key piece that we have face-to-face, which is the nonverbals, right? So what's the messaging that's coming across from a nonverbal standpoint, right? Now you can pick up on that sometimes in a little bit of the tone that people come across with, but it's not quite as clear as it is face-to-face. But then look at digital communication, right? No, on active listening, we're not really actively listening, right? We're reading what is coming to us, right? Clarity and concise messaging, maybe, right? But people tend to be a little more casual with these digital platforms, right? And you see more and more people don't even use punctuation, don't even use capitalization, right? And sometimes just run one sentence into another. And so there's all kinds of clarity and concise messaging issues that might come up. It's more difficult on feedback mechanisms and on conflict resolution strategies as well, right? So have you ever gotten that text that you're just like, what the heck are they talking about, right? Now that can certainly happen if we're talking face-to-face as well, but more likely to happen in a digital communication way. All right. So I want to make a couple of key points about this. One is digital communication is great for tasks and project updates, not so good for interpersonal development, right? It can be okay, it can work, but it's not the most effective way to really build interpersonal activities, right? Digital communication can help people hide, right? We've seen this a lot over the time from the pandemic, where it's much easier for people to just kind of hide and do their thing, right? And for managers to really lose track of people. Digital communication is a tool for team management, not a replacement for team management, right? So are you utilizing it as a tool or are you utilizing it as your only way of team management, right? And then developmental feedback is best face-to-face or on the phone, right? Because they're going to pick up on your tone of voice and the messaging and they can actively listen, right? I know of people that have fired people over text, right? Or told people, you're doing a really crappy job. Okay. Where's the context to that, right? So really important for us to kind of keep that in mind, that digital communication is really great, but not necessarily the best. All right. Love this quote from George Bernard Shaw. The biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place, right? We make the assumption sometimes that, guess what? I sent them the text. I sent them the Slack. The information's right there, right? But that doesn't mean that they got it, that they understood it, right? And so digital communications can feel like we've delivered the message, and yet if the message isn't received on the other side, that can be a bit of a problem. All right. Yeah, great quote, isn't it, Mary? All right. I wanted to share quickly, we've got a really great half-day class on this, communication and teamwork. It's great for teams that are size 4 to 40, really highly interactive. It helps people really understand how communication breaks down, understand team dynamics, and then create some action planning for that. So if you're interested in learning more about that, feel free to reach out to me. Happy to share more information with you about that. All right, let's draw some conclusions here, coming right up on the top of the hour. All right, so here's some things that I really want to have you think about and take away from this conversation today. Understanding digital communication platforms can make the difference between strong and weak workplace communication, because these platforms serve as the backbone for modern collaboration. By mastering these tools, teams can streamline communication, share information effortlessly, and foster a culture of transparency and inclusivity. Conversely, a lack of understanding or misuse of these digital platforms can lead to miscommunication, missed opportunities, and efficiencies. So if we don't have a good understanding of this in the digital age, it's really going to come back to bite us. We really need to get a good understanding. So if you want to do a deeper dive on this, absolutely feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to share more information, and I'm also happy to hang around and see if there's any other questions. Let's move on and talk about our next Lunch and Learn. So Mary, you're going to be doing this one. This is on June 5th from noon to 1, and this is building your emotional intelligence. So give us a little preview of that.
So our ability to get along with others really comes from understanding ourselves and then being able to have love and empathy for our fellow man. And when I first discovered in the early 80s Daniel Goleman's work of working with emotional intelligence in his book, I was intrigued by, how do we develop emotional intelligence? And is there a formula in which we could build emotional intelligence? And through the years, I've collaborated and grabbed lots and collected lots and lots of reading about emotional intelligence. And I've got some really fun information to share about how you can build yours and how teams can improve theirs. So join us.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary. I'm looking forward to that. I also wanted to quickly mention, we've got some Excel classes that are coming up that we do. So Thursday, May 9th from 9 to noon, we've got our Excel level 3 class. The 16th, we're doing our level 1 class from 1 to 4. And on June 20th, we're doing level 2 from 1 to 4. So you can go to either one of our websites and sign up for those classes if that is of interest to you. And other than that, I want to thank you for coming with today. I hope the information has been very useful for you. Got your brain cells stirring a little bit and thinking about that. And again, I'll hang out a little bit and see if anybody has any additional questions. But thank you so much for joining us. And again, hope you had some good information come out of it.
Great job, Kevin. Great job.
Thank you.
I'm going to stop the recording and I'm going to leave you here. I've got another Zoom that I need to jump on. So
all right,
we'll see you all next month.